Bread machine tips and tricks. 11 bread machine tips and tricks. Let's get started. Tip 1. Be mindful of the order you put the ingredients in the machine. With most machines, you start with the liquids then move on to the dry ingredients. The very last ingredient to add is the yeast. I make a little hollow in the mound of flour for the yeast. This ensures that it does not have contact with the liquids until the machine starts doing its thing. Tip 2. Know the capacity, flour-wise, of your machine. This is necessary so that you can select a properly scaled recipe. One way to determine this is to go to the manual for your machine, or look online, and see what it says about the capacity of your machine in pounds. Tip 3. About 5 or 10 minutes into the dough making cycle, open the lid, and if the machine is either struggling, loud clunking noises, or the dough looks dry, add more water, a tablespoon at a time. You should be seeing a nice, cohesive dough ball. Tip 4. On the other hand, if the dough looks gloopy or soupy, add additional flour, sparingly, until a nice ball is formed. If the dough is too loose, the top will shrink during baking, and while it will taste okay, it will not be very pretty. Tip 5. Don't freak out if you have a basic machine without a lot of cycles, sweet, French, whole wheat, etc. For the most part, I use a basic cycle for everything and my ABM breads come out fine. Tip 6. If you are watching your fat intake, use applesauce instead of the butter or oil called for in the recipe. And if not, try butter powder instead of oils or stick products. You will be rewarded with superior taste, guaranteed. Tip 7. Use real sugar. Sugar feeds the yeast and helps the dough to rise. You can use honey or molasses instead, but just say no to sugar substitutes. They will not work. Tip 8. Feel free to cut the salt called for in the recipe in half. I find that it makes no difference in the final results. Tip 9. Bread flour is not the same as all-purpose flour. It is higher in protein and gluten, and it is necessary to give your bread its fine grain. Tip 10. If the bread rises well but collapses during baking, it is either rising too fast or the size of the recipe is too large. The next time, try cutting back on the yeast or sugar or using a recipe that uses less flour overall. Tip 11. Some breads, by their very nature, are dense and heavy. This is especially true if you are using a significant proportion of whole grains. If this is happening with white breads, try cutting back of the salt, which inhibits rising.